When my boots finally touched American soil after 9 grueling months stationed overseas, every fiber of my being craved just in one thing: to fall into my husband's embrace and settle into the home we had bought right before my deployment began. But only 3 days after my homecoming, my phone buzzed with a call that would unravel everything. It was the elderly woman who had sold us our house. Her voice quivered, thick with fear. "Please, don't say a word to your husband. Meet me by yourself." She revealed that a hidden security camera, one she'd forgotten to remove from the master bedroom, had been quietly recording everything since before we moved in. What that footage captured during my time away was about to turn my entire world upside down. My name is Danielle Caldwell, and at 31, I believed I had already witnessed the harshest realities life could offer. I had endured 9 punishing months overseas, marking off each agonizing day until I could finally return to something resembling ordinary life. More than anything, I longed to walk back into the peaceful suburban house that my husband Mark and I had closed on right before my unit shipped out. When my plane finally landed and I spotted Mark waiting there for me, it felt almost too good to be real. Yet, once that initial rush of joy faded, an unsettling feeling crept in that I couldn't quite shake. Mark was fidgety and distracted, his eyes darting to his phone every few minutes, and every time I brought up the house or asked how he'd spent his months alone, his answers felt oddly evasive. I told myself it was simply the stress of adjusting to my return, until the 3rd day home changed everything. Mark had left the house briefly to run some errand when my phone started ringing, an unfamiliar local number lighting up the screen. The instant I picked up, a shaky woman's voice asked to speak with me by name. It was Evelyn, the woman who had sold us our home. "Danielle," she murmured, panic bleeding through every syllable. "Please don't tell your husband anything. Just come alone." She confessed to leaving behind a concealed camera inside the house that she'd never gotten around to removing after the sale. She begged me to meet her privately and immediately at a diner across town, warning that whatever she had witnessed on that recording during my absence had changed absolutely everything. My pulse pounded as I snatched my keys and rushed out the door, having no idea what horror awaited me. The entire drive there, cold sweat trickled down my spine as my thoughts spiraled through every dreadful possibility. Had Mark brought someone else into our bed while I was risking my life on the other side of the world? Was he secretly living a completely different existence behind my back? The idea of betrayal alone made it hard to breathe, but somewhere beneath the panic, my years of military training whispered that something far more sinister was unfolding. The diner sat at the edge of town, its neon sign flickering weakly under an overcast sky. I found Evelyn hidden away in a back booth, both hands wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee that had gone cold long ago. She looked frail, a woman well into her 60s, but what struck me most wasn't sadness in her eyes. It was raw, unmistakable fear. The moment I slid into the booth, she leaned in close. "Danielle, I am so terribly sorry to pull you into this," she began, her words trembling. She explained that before ever putting the house on the market, she had secretly installed a hidden camera disguised as a smoke detector in the master bedroom, originally meant to keep watch over contractors doing renovation work. But in the whirlwind following her husband's unexpected death and her subsequent move, she had entirely forgotten about the cloud storage account still linked to that device. "I never intended to spy on anyone," Evelyn whispered, sliding a small black flash drive across the sticky tabletop toward me. Then 2 months ago, my phone lit up with a notification. At first, I assumed it was some kind of error, but when I opened that live stream, "Danielle, what your husband has been doing inside that house is not about another woman at all." She pushed the drive closer. "Take it. Watch it somewhere private where he'll never see, but you cannot let him find out you have this. He isn't who you believe him to be." I drove home with that tiny flash drive weighing on me like a live grenade tucked in my pocket. Stepping through the front door, I found Mark casually assembling a sandwich in the kitchen. He glanced up with that same easy, familiar grin and asked where I'd disappeared to. Forcing a laugh, I invented a story about needing a walk to stretch my legs, and somehow I made it through the rest of the evening without cracking. I waited until well past midnight, listening to Mark's slow, steady breathing beside me before slipping quietly out of bed. Grabbing my laptop, I locked myself inside the downstairs bathroom, hands trembling as I plugged in the drive and opened the video files. I had steeled myself to find proof of an affair, another woman in our home, betrayal of the most personal kind. Instead, as the first clip loaded, my heartbreak dissolved into confusion. The footage showed Mark, but he wasn't by himself. Only 3 weeks into my deployment, 2 men in dark work clothing stood beside him in our bedroom, hauling in duffel bags stuffed with tools. They weren't there to relax or catch up. They were methodically knocking on walls with acoustic equipment, tearing up sections of flooring, and sweeping thermal imaging devices across the structural beams. Clip after clip, spanning several months, showed Mark directing these men with the precision of someone running a military operation. This had nothing to do with infidelity. He was hunting for something concealed deep within the house itself, using my absence to quietly transform our home into the site of a calculated crime while I served overseas. The following morning, once Mark had left for work, I met Evelyn again, this time at a secluded park far from prying eyes. Sitting beside her on a weathered bench, I described everything the footage had shown me. He wasn't cheating, I told her, my voice sharp against the cool morning air. He's dismantling the house piece by piece. What exactly did your husband hide inside those walls? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears as she explained that her late husband, Arthur, a once prosperous property developer with a deep mistrust of banks, had concealed a fortune before his sudden death. Millions in bearer bonds, gold, and untraceable property deeds, somewhere within the home's reinforced foundation. Everything snapped into place with a sickening clarity. Mark hadn't stumbled onto this house by chance. He had learned of Arthur's hidden treasure long before we ever made an offer. He had steered us toward this exact property, fully aware that my deployment would hand him 9 unsupervised months to dismantle walls and hunt down that fortune. He had married a service member, patiently waited for the military to send me overseas, and exploited my absence as the perfect cover to pull off a massive heist, intending to keep every last cent for himself, while leaving both Evelyn and me with nothing. But Mark had made one critical miscalculation. He assumed I'd come home completely oblivious to his scheme. In the military, once an enemy reveals their position, you don't rush in recklessly, you lay a trap. Mark believed he'd pulled off the perfect con, never realizing he was up against a logistics officer trained to spot tactical vulnerabilities. I refused to let rage cloud my thinking. Instead, I would use his own greed as the weapon to bring him down. Rather than confronting him outright, I played the part of the unsuspecting devoted wife. Each morning brought a goodbye kiss, each evening a shared dinner and warm smile, all while my mind quietly assembled the pieces of his downfall. Behind the scenes, I worked tirelessly. First, I consulted a trustworthy attorney, bringing Evelyn along to confirm that the concealed assets rightfully belonged to Arthur's estate, establishing that Mark's search constituted outright fraud and grand larceny. Then, I secretly placed my own network of high-definition cameras throughout the house, allowing me to track his every move directly from my phone. Watching those live feeds felt almost unreal. I saw him poring over old blueprints, measuring support beams in the basement, and running a jackhammer wrapped in thick blankets to muffle the noise whenever I stepped out. He was closing in, zeroing his efforts on a reinforced wall hidden behind the furnace downstairs. My attorney reached out to local law enforcement and fraud investigators, presenting the mounting video evidence Evelyn and I had compiled. To guarantee the charges would hold up without question, we needed to catch Mark physically breaking into the hidden vault, so I told him I'd be spending the weekend visiting my parents. The trap was set, he took the bait, and now it was simply a matter of closing in. When that rainy Saturday night finally arrived, I sat parked 2 blocks from the house inside an unmarked police vehicle, eyes fixed on the live camera feed streaming to my phone. Detective Vance sat beside me, equally focused on the screen. Mark had no idea I was anywhere near the property. Through the monitor, we watched him descend into the basement, arms loaded with a drill, sledgehammer, and angle grinder. Thick work gloves covered his hands, and his expression radiated pure greed. He marched straight to the concealed space behind the furnace, ripped away the fake insulation, and began tearing into the reinforced wall with frantic, desperate force. With a thunderous crack, the concrete finally gave way. Mark reached into the newly exposed cavity, his hands shaking as he lifted out a heavy, dust-caked steel lockbox. He threw his head back and laughed triumphantly, clutching the box against his chest like a hard-won trophy. He genuinely believed he had won. That was the exact moment Detective Vance gave the signal. The front door burst open with a deafening crash as 3 armed officers stormed down the staircase. I followed right behind them, flipping on the harsh overhead lights as I entered the basement. Mark went rigid, the lockbox slipping from his hands and crashing onto the concrete floor. All the color drained from his face, leaving him pale as a corpse. "Danielle?" he stammered, eyes flicking wildly between the officers and my unwavering stare. What are you doing here?" I can explain everything." "Don't bother, Mark," I told him, my tone calm and unshaken. "Detective Vance has already seen every second of your little demolition project. So has Evelyn." He opened his mouth to argue, but the click of handcuffs closing around his wrists cut him off before another lie could escape. As officers led him out of the house, he glanced back at me one final time. No longer the husband who had tried to deceive his deployed wife, but simply a fraudster caught red-handed in his own trap. The aftermath came swiftly and completely. Faced with overwhelming video evidence, financial documentation, and the recovered lockbox containing more than $2 million in gold and bearer bonds, Mark's defense collapsed entirely. He was found guilty of grand larceny, attempted fraud, and conspiracy, earning himself a lengthy prison sentence instead of the wealthy future he'd envisioned. Our marriage was dissolved through a swift, straightforward legal process, and I made certain every dollar of the recovered fortune was returned to Evelyn. Overwhelmed with gratitude for helping preserve her late husband's legacy, Evelyn insisted on signing the house over to me entirely, free and clear of any mortgage. 3 months later, I found myself relaxing on the front porch with a warm mug of coffee, listening to the gentle rustle of oak leaves overhead. The house that had briefly become a battleground of lies and deception had finally become exactly what it was always meant to be: a true home, a peaceful sanctuary earned through patience, strategy, and unwavering truth. I had spent months serving my country in a war zone, but the fight to reclaim my own life right here at home turned out to be the toughest battle I've ever faced. I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done if you discovered your own spouse was hiding a secret this enormous while you were away serving? Share your thoughts in the comments and let me know which city you're tuning in from. If this story kept you hooked, be sure to like and subscribe for more real-life stories just like this one. Thanks so much for watching.